Friends, Arizona is a state famous for the Grand Canyon, copper mines, and cactuses. If there's one thing that is scarce in this state, it is rain. However, having a semi-desert climate has not prevented Arizona from being the state with the fastest growing population in the entire United States. To give you an idea, twice as many people lived in Arizona today as 30 years ago. They just passed the 7 million mark. In fact, it is very striking to see how fairly similar neighboring states like Nevada, New Mexico, and even Utah each have less than half the population of Arizona. And you might be asking yourself, so what on earth is going on? Well, it seems that the answer is obvious: immigration. Demographics offer little doubt. Today, 30% of Arizona's population is of Hispanic origin, compared to only 19% 30 years ago. And take note, because the influence of the Hispanic population is only going to keep growing. Since 2017, births to Latino mothers are higher than those of any other group. And of course, over the years, all this will have an effect on Arizona's electorate. People under 18 can't vote this time around, but it's only a matter of time before they can. That's why a report from Arizona State University estimates that the Hispanic proportion of the electorate will grow from 15% in 2010 to 25% by 2030. So, dear friends of VisualPolitik, the conclusion is simple. Arizona, a state that helped Donald Trump to reach the White House in 2016, is becoming increasingly Hispanic. In this video, we will examine how all this could influence the presidential elections next Tuesday, 3rd of November, and future elections. Let's get started. Friends, Arizona has historically been a Republican stronghold. Since the end of World War II and the victory of Democrat Harry Truman in 1948, Arizona has supported the Republican Party's presidential candidate, except in 1996, and on that occasion, Bill Clinton won by a landslide. However, now it seems that all this could be about to change.
Biden leads by 8 points in Arizona over Trump.
The importance of Arizona is considerable, especially for President Trump. But why? Well, basically because it's quite clear that Trump's chances of staying in the White House depend on maintaining the support he received in 2016. The same is also true for the Democrats. It is actually more important for Biden to win now in Arizona, which means 11 votes in the Electoral College, than for Clinton when he did it in 1996. And there were only 8 votes, or in Harry Truman's time, when there were only 4. The fact that Arizona is no longer a Republican stronghold could become a major headache for Republicans for years to come, because its importance in the Electoral College is growing. And that's why Arizona is so important. In 2020, we are talking about the 11 electoral seats that one candidate wins and the 11 that the other candidate fails to win. 4 years ago, 77 electoral college votes separated Trump and Clinton. And of those 77, Arizona alone would represent 22 votes. Doesn't seem so few now, does it? So the question is, could Arizona stop being a guaranteed red state and become a swing state? What makes us think that the people of this state are going to vote for Biden, or why they might stay with Trump? Will Arizona be the state that decides in November who will occupy the White House for the next 4 years? Today on VisualPolitik, we will answer all these questions. But first, let's take a look at some history.
The former sheriff of Maricopa.
Maricopa County is one of 15 counties in Arizona. It is home to Phoenix, the state's capital and most populous city. And I assure you that we are not exaggerating one bit if we say that for many years, the only news that reached us from here was that concerning Joe Arpaio, the former sheriff of Maricopa. Joe Arpaio was elected sheriff of Maricopa County in 1993, when he was 60 years old. He remained in office for 24 years until 2017, having been re-elected up to 5 times as sheriff. He was always the Republican Party-backed candidate, and he proclaimed himself as the toughest sheriff in the entire USA. His fame even reached an international level because of his harsh treatment of prisoners and his persecution of illegal immigrants. One of his biggest controversies was the Tent City Jail. You see, before Arpaio became sheriff, the number of inmates in Arizona exceeded the maximum allowed in the existing facilities. So many inmates were released before they served their time in order to comply with the rules and to avoid overcrowding. But Arpaio came up with a solution: Tent City. a prison made up of tents and watched over from sentry boxes from which was hung a message that read 3 rooms. This is how Arizona's prison policy suddenly changed. All prisoners were sentenced to serve their full sentences because, in the end, if more space was needed, Sheriff Arpaio would simply just put up more tents. Of course, the conditions were not exactly the best. Setting up a campsite in Arizona doesn't seem like a great idea. Look at this news from just 3 years ago.
Arizona is housing prisoners in a tent city and is 117 degrees.
That's 47 degrees Celsius. If Arpaio wanted his prison to resemble hell, he clearly wasn't lacking the heat. Then there are other details that attracted the attention of the media all over the world. The prisoners, generally convicted of minor crimes, were forced to wear pink underwear and black and white striped suits, the classic costume of a prisoner. All that was missing were the shackles and the ball and train dragged by foot to complete the look. Of course, human rights organizations denounced the denigrating treatment of prisoners, but the point is that deep down, Arpaio was delighted to receive such attention. Of course, in the long run, so much attention creates problems, and boy, has Arpaio had his share. Raids by the sheriffs to search for illegal immigrants led to accusations of racial profiling for years. A federal judge reached that conclusion in 2011. He ordered Arpaio to end his immigration roundups because they were detaining people without evidence of having committed any crime. The veteran sheriff ignored the order, and in 2017, he was convicted of criminal contempt. Arpaio was facing a possible sentence of up to 6 months in prison, but he has very powerful friends. In the 2016 elections, he showed full support for Donald Trump's presidential candidacy. So when he was convicted, the president came to his aid and pardoned him.
Sheriff Joe is a patriot. Sheriff Joe loves our country. Sheriff Joe protected our borders. And Sheriff Joe was very unfairly treated by the Obama administration, especially right before an election that he would have won. And he was elected many times. So I stand by my pardon of Sheriff Joe, and I think the people of Arizona who really know him best would agree with me.
It was Trump's first pardon and did not meet with the approval of many Republicans, nor with the man who had held the office of Arizona Senator for 3 decades, the late John McCain.
Mr. Arpaio was found guilty of criminal contempt for continuing to illegally profile Latinos living in Arizona based on their perceived immigration status in violation of a judge's order. The president has the authority to make this pardon, but doing so at this time undermines his claim for the respect of rule and law, as Mr. Arpaio has shown no remorse for his actions. John McCain.
Well, this was the Arizona that supported Trump to become president back in 2016. Maricopa County, whose voters re-elected Arpaio multiple times, recognized in the mogul the same anti-immigrant rhetoric and policy proposals they had already heard from the former sheriff. But having said that, let's see what Arizona has been like during the Trump era.
The President's Great Wall.
In 2015, Trump launched his race for the White House. He soon made clear his views on Mexican immigration.
They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
Donald Trump's first term in office has dramatically reformed the US immigration system. Since taking office, his administration has taken more than 400 executive actions on immigration. So did Trump keep the promises he made 4 years ago to win over the voters? Did he deliver on rhetoric that many might dismiss as populist? Well, it might seem that no, he didn't. Not at all. You see, the promise to build a wall along the US-Mexico border was one of Donald Trump's most controversial campaign promises. The magnate spoke of a 1,600-kilometer concrete wall with the rest of the border secured by natural barriers. What's more, Trump also insisted that Mexico would pay for it and estimated the cost at around $8 billion. However, 4 years later, the reality is that Mexico has not put up a single peso, nor has Trump actually built the wall, his precious wall. And while we're on the subject, an internal Department of Homeland Security report estimated that Trump's proposed wall would actually cost $21.6 billion, more than double the magnate's estimate. We're talking about an issue that has been brought up consistently in fights between Republicans and Democrats. And as the Democrats have controlled the House of Representatives in recent years, they have blocked the allocation of funds for the wall, something that led Trump to declare a national state of emergency regarding the border in February 2019. This declaration made it possible to gain access to $15 billion by diverting funds from from the fight against drug trafficking and from the military budget. Since then, the president says that 480 kilometers of wall have been built. But what he forgets to mention is that 420 of those kilometers have been replacement of, or repairs, to existing border structures that had deteriorated. But hold on a minute, because the wall is not the only immigration promise that candidate Trump made in 2016. Trump also pledged to deport all undocumented immigrants. This would have resulted in the expulsion of approximately 11.3 million people from the United States. However, the Republican candidate softened his stance somewhat. As the 2016 election campaign progressed, Trump reduced the promised deportations to about 2 to 3 million people, promising to focus his efforts on driving out criminals, gang members, and drug traffickers. In the end, the reality is that the total number of people deported by Trump in his first term is around 1 million people. Although it is true that he has tried to expel more, he has encountered enormous opposition. In fact, one of the most controversial measures was his attempt to end Obama's Immigrant Child Protection Program. It had to go all the way to the US Supreme Court to stop him in his tracks by ruling against his proposal to rescind the so-called DACA, or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which protects some 650,000 young people who entered the US without papers when they were just children. The point is that if there's one thing that has changed with Trump, it has been the discourse. And don't forget the influence that Hispanics already have in Arizona. But let's go on. If we're talking about Trump and the year 2020, it's impossible not to talk about the pesky coronavirus. And here it is clear that the president has not found a wall capable of stopping the pandemic. The numbers in the United States speak for themselves. At this point, more than 8 million infections and more than 220,000 deaths. Well, the biggest problem for Arizona is that 95% of its population lives in urban areas. Arizona is currently the 14th most populous state in the United States. However, the fact that the population is more concentrated in cities has increased the incidence of the virus. We're talking about the state with the 8th highest number of cases, more than 230,000 infections, and 6,000 deaths at the time of making this video. In fact, the governor of Arizona, Republican Doug Ducey, was forced to decree the confinement of the population from April 1st for a month and a half. Friends, the coronavirus has shattered the terms on which we thought this election would move. Trump bragging about economic growth, to Democrats calling for more change in social issues such as immigration. But 2020 has changed everyone's lives, including Americans. Now, if we take a step back and look beyond that, we will see that if there is one thing that has changed during these past 4 years, it has been Arizona. Listen up.
Now more than ever, we need a president who will put service before self.
The new Arizona.
We've said it before, Arizona is a historically Republican stronghold. And yes, 4 years ago, they gave their 11 electoral college votes to Donald Trump. They trusted the tycoon. But since then, we have seen many signs of breakup between the president and the Republican electorate in Arizona. A key factor has surely been the contempt with which Trump treated Senator John McCain on several occasions.
A war hero.
He's a war hero.
He's a war hero.
5.5 years.
He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured, okay? I hate to tell you.
The former presidential candidate who ran against Obama never hesitated to make public his disagreements with the tycoon.
There's a individual that lives in Phoenix and he's 92. And he weighed 110 pounds when he got out of the German prison camp. And he said to me, Senator McCain, why does the president not like me? You know, that's hard to explain to a 92-year-old man.
But things go beyond any small controversy. In addition to the terrible disregard and attacks that Trump directed at McCain, Arizona actually feels like the guardian of the conservative soul of the Republican Party, the disciples of Senator Barry Goldwater.
Senator Dirksen of Illinois offers Senator Barry Goldwater of Arizona.
Barry Goldwater was a senator for Arizona for 30 years, and the Republican Party's presidential candidate in the 1964 election. He lost to Lyndon Johnson, but his legacy is considered key to the revival of the conservative movement. Goldwater relied on a liberal ideology focused on 3 goals: reducing the power of the federal government, promoting economic and political freedoms, and combating communism abroad. The result had a familiar first and last name, Ronald Reagan.
Fellow Republicans, it is the cause of republicanism to resist concentrations of power, private or public.
Barry Goldwater will always be the senator from Arizona, the one history recalls with appreciation and delight. In all the histories of American politics, he will remain a chapter unto himself. The rest of us will have to make do as footnotes.
The fact is that the late John McCain was a very critical voice against President Trump. But 6 months after the magnate was sworn in, McCain was diagnosed with terminal cancer. So the voice of Republican conservatism had to be vindicated by the other senator from Arizona. Jeff Flake condemned Trump's influence on the conservative movement in a book. He denounced the Republican Party for giving up all its beliefs and ideology in exchange for the power offered by someone as authoritarian and populist as Donald Trump. This is how the senator himself explained it when he announced that he would not run for re-election.
It is clear at this moment that a traditional conservative who believes in limited government and free markets, who is devoted to free trade, who is pro-immigration, has a narrower and narrower path to nomination in the Republican Party, the party that has so long defined itself by its belief in those things.
I think that the party has been compromised by things like populism. I admired John McCain my entire life.
In 1992, Mr. Republican Barry Goldwater endorsed a Democrat running for Congress over a Republican who he felt would not represent the party well. And so it is because of my conservatism and because of my belief in the Constitution and in the separation of power, and because I am gravely concerned about the conduct and behavior of our current president, that I stand here today proudly and wholehearted to endorse Joe Biden as the next president of the United States of America.
Jeff Flake's term as senator ended in 2018. In the Senate election to fill up his vacancy, pro-Trump candidate Martha McSally was defeated. It had been 30 years since the Democratic Party had been able to win one of the 2 senatorial seats for Arizona. Well, in the upcoming elections this November 3rd, the person who will fill the vacant seat after the death of John McCain will also be chosen. McSally is once again the Republican candidate.
Martha, come up just fast, quick. Fast! Fast, come on, quick. You got 1 minute. 1 minute, Martha, say. They don't want to hear this, Martha. Come on, let's go. Quick, 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 quick.
If she loses, it would be the first time since 1952 that both senators from Arizona have belonged to the Democratic Party, and this aspect of the polls offers little doubt. That is exactly what will happen. So friends, the feeling is that Trumpism is falling apart in Arizona. In fact, the Democrats also won the last election for the House of Representatives. And even Joe Arpaio, Trump's loyal follower, has suffered 3 electoral setbacks. He lost the Maricopa County Sheriff's race to his Democratic opponent, then he was pardoned and competed unsuccessfully against Martha McSally for the Senate seat. And this time around, the Republicans haven't even given him the chance to be re-elected as sheriff. Arpaio's star burnt out. Let's see what happens to Trump, because the race in Arizona shows signs of breakdown.
Former Senator Jeff Flake, former Republican Jim Colby throw support behind Joe Biden.
My name's Joe Biden. I'm a Democrat. And I love John McCain.
The truth is that we have all seen this movie before. Republicans in California tried to stoke up the fear of illegal immigrants in the 1990s, and all it did was prop up support of the governor by relying on the popularity of Arnold Schwarzenegger. But since then, well, hasta la vista, baby. Hispanics never forgave themselves, and Hispanics are gaining more of a voice in Arizona too. But now it's your turn. Do you think Arizona will continue to be a Republican stronghold? Do you think the Hispanic population will seek payback for Trump's anti-immigration discourse? Leave your answers in the comments. So I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please hit like if you did, and don't forget to subscribe for brand new videos. Don't forget to check out our friends at the Reconsider Media podcast. They provided the vocals in this episode that were not mine. And also this channel is possible because of Patreon and our patrons on the platform. Please consider joining them and supporting our mission of providing independent political coverage. And as always, I'll see you in the next video.
I'm Grant Woods. For many, many years I was Arizona's Republican Attorney General. It's time to remember what the Constitution is all about. I ask people to join me in supporting Joe Biden.